something that happened to me, and in the interest of transparency, I did have an issue. YouTube, Ant-Man Moto here, and I am going to make this video finally. We are racing daylight. Woo. But the Aprilia Tuono factory, 2019 Aprilia Tuono factory Summit Attack number 24 of 25 is here with the beautiful LV Shorty exhaust on it. It sounds magnificent. I just sent in an oil sample to Blackstone Laboratories because the bike now has, believe it or not, 27,000 miles on it, and the engine had some work done on it last year, and I was told then the engine's in great shape, everything looked good inside, but that laboratory test, it's like a piss test, and we'll see exactly what the oil's doing and what kind of metals are in the oil and if it's normal or if it's wearing excessively. Blackstone Laboratories is doing that for us. I want to take this opportunity to fill you in on this motorcycle. I've had it now for 3 years, coming up here shortly. I think I got it in 2021, back in September or October of 2021. So it's coming up on 3 years of ownership of this bike. This bike, this Aprilia Tuono factory, is my dream bike. I have wanted an Aprilia Tuono since it first came out in 2003. I knew then I wanted a Tuono, and then when they updated it to the Gen 2, I actually ended up getting one of those, the 1000R, and I owned it for a couple of years until I got my first V4, which I then replaced with this V4. And so there's something about this motorcycle that absolutely hits me the right way. Exactly. It's got the right amount of rawness and the right amount of torque and just mind-numbing acceleration. That engine note is like you dream about it. Listen to this. Woo! You dream about that sound. You have to experience an Aprilia V4 motor with a good exhaust on it to understand how exciting it is to ride and own this motorcycle. It is a dream. And this particular bike is a 2019 factory that was a commemoration of the very final motorcycle race at the Pikes Peak hill climb, believe it or not. Carlin Dunn in 2019 was on his way to setting a new record for this particular category of motorcycle aboard the brand new Ducati Street Fighter, when tragically just before he crossed the finish line, he went off the side of the hill and he died. He actually didn't finish the race. I think they said he was like a 1/10 of a mile from completing the course. And the course is 12 miles long. So he had braved the whole course until the very last second, and then he made a mistake, and unfortunately that mistake cost him his life. In second place was a gentleman by the name of Rennie Skaysbrook, who you can follow him on Instagram. He's a real cool dude. And they even had his bike, which was a 2018 Tuono factory. They even had it on display at the Moto Club of Santa Monica, or Moto Club Los Angeles. And I've got a picture of me with that bike, number 34. It was a Aprilia Tuono factory. So, rest in peace, Carlin Dunn. He tragically lost his life. Rennie ended up winning the event, and so Aprilia made 25 special edition Tuono factories to commemorate that win. And this bike that I am sitting aboard and that I am talking to you from is one of those 25 motorcycles. Now, I remember when this motorcycle was announced, and I remember seeing a picture of it, and I remember thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to get that bike, because it's going to be a collector's bike. It's a rare machine. You know, the guys that buy them are never going to let them go. And I just really looked at it as, wow, that sure would be nice. But I wrote it off as it'll never happen. I'll never get one. But when one came available at Mountain Motorsports up off the Cobb Parkway, and my boy Austin, Izzy Moto, or I think that's his name, IZZY Moto. Dude's awesome, man. He sold me this bike. He sold me my MT-09, and all he does is wheelie. I swear, when he's not like selling bikes, he's wheeling bikes. But anyway, I was up there, and he said, "Hey, man, you know." Because I don't even know why I was up there. I think I was just up there hanging out, and I saw it on the floor, and I said, "What is that?" And he was like, "It's for sale." And then I went and looked at it, and it had several prices that were, you know, repriced. Like, it started out at $16,000, and then they repriced it to $15,000. Then they repriced it to $14,000, and then they repriced it to $13,500. And by the time I got it, it was repriced to like $12,200. And for this bike at the time, only had 5,000 miles on it. I said, you know what? That is a steal. That is a deal. And I traded my regular 1100 RR Aprilia Tuono for this bike. I also had a GSXS 1000 that I also sold, and it went along with the proceeds from this bike. I can normally squeeze under here, but oh man, they got somebody in the parking lot. But I also sold my GSXS 1000 along with this, and that's how I got this bike. So now, here we are 3 years later, and I wanted to discuss what it was like owning this bike and what it's been like. You know, has it been good? Has it been bad? Would I do it again? You know, all of the tips that I can give to a prospective Aprilia Tuono buyer, because I have a lot of knowledge about this motorcycle. So I'm going to find a spot up here in this parking lot, and I'm going to park this bike, and we're going to talk about it right now. Now, I'm in a church, and it looks like some kind of service is going on down there, so hopefully we don't get messed with too bad, but the parking lot is open. So I'm going to shut the engine off, get off the bike. Oh, that sun is going to give it a nice glow right now. It's a little dirty. It's been up at the Dragon recently, and it rained a little bit, so I've got a little bit of rain schmuck on it, and but look at that. It's got the forged aluminum rims on it. I've got the LV10 shorty exhaust on it. I also have these turn signals that were put on by my guys at Southeast Motorcycle, and it's got the tail tidy. My suspension was serviced at 24,000 miles by Olin's. The rear shock was sent off. The guys at Southeast Motorcycle sent the shock off, and then the forks were serviced in-house at Southeast Motorcycle. If you own an Aprilia or a Moto Guzzi or any bike, but especially an Aprilia, we are blessed to, in the Atlanta area, have a dealership like Southeast Motorcycle. Those guys, they used to have only one location down in Savannah, Georgia, but fortunately they opened up a second location here in the Atlanta area. It's in a town called Douglasville, which is about 20 minutes west of downtown Atlanta. So if you are in the Southeast, but especially in the Atlanta area, we are super lucky to have a dealership like that close to us. So you're thinking about buying an Aprilia Tuono. What are some things you should consider? Well, first of all, let's talk about the ergos of this particular bike. This is a 2019, but from 2019 till the current iteration of this bike, the ergos have not changed terribly much. These are very comfortable bikes, and when I mean comfortable, I mean you can ride one of these all day long. Your wrists won't get sore, and I don't know what kind of magic they've worked in this seat, but I have a problem with my tailbone getting sore if the seat rounds up too much and puts pressure on the bottom of my tailbone, or you know, that little part that's like a tail, like if we were dogs it would continue on to a tail. That thing touches the seat that rounds up too much here, and it causes pressure over time, and it's uncomfortable. This bike does not do that at all. The seat is all day comfortable. The reach to the bars is very natural, but it is a bit aggressive. I have actually added 20mm risers. I don't know if you can see those in there, but that little riser, I put that in there to give me a little more leverage and a little more comfort with turning in and maneuvering in parking lots and things like that. I do think that it's a pretty racy posture stock, and the new factories are the same way. Now, the 1100 RRs are just the regular Tuonos that aren't factories. They come with slightly taller risers, about as tall as these that I have on mine now with those inserts. So I think they're 20mm taller than the factory, and that bike was more positioned to be a touring bike. And if you're not ripping on these things, they'll get decent gas mileage. You can probably go about 150 miles on a tank of gas with one of these if you're riding it calmly and normally. But I don't know why you would buy this bike to ride it calmly and normally. Let's just be honest about that. This bike is not designed to ride calmly and normally. It's designed to act the fool on and rip and feel that power and just enjoy being alive. And that is what happens with this bike. So, you know, if you're ripping and running on it, then you'll probably get about 120 miles to a tank of gas, but that's still decent. But yeah, the ergonomics is very comfortable. I did put the rims on it, so it makes it handle a lot better, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The performance of the engine and the power, I have the Gabbro Stage, what do I have? The Gabbro Stage 2 map and tune on this bike. I will tell you, the Aprilia Racing map is good, but the Gabbro tune is freaking amazing. His tune is like, it releases all of the Kraken in this bike. I would say the Gabbro tune is something that you absolutely should invest in if you buy a Tuono. At the bare minimum, even if you don't change the exhaust and you keep it completely stock, just put his stock tune on there, and it'll still get rid of some of the limitations on the RPMs, and it'll make the throttle actually give you full throttle rather than how it's dialed back to maybe give you only 60% throttle at certain RPMs. And I don't know why they do the fuel tables like that, but I've been told it's to pass emissions and that type of thing. So if you don't want to have your bike restricted and kind of choked down, at the bare minimum, put just a Gabbro stock tune on your bike, and you will notice a marked difference between stock and with his stuff on it. He has an amazing ability with these bikes. Every bike has their guru. Every cult bike, and I would call the Tuono kind of a cult bike. Every cult bike has its guru, and Gabbro is the Aprilia guru. So definitely with this engine performance, with the Gabbro tune and this pipe on it, it works beautifully. This pipe actually sounds better than the Akrapovic, the larger Akrapovic, but the larger Akrapovic actually works a little bit better. It actually creates a little more torque feel, where this you might lose just a smidge of torque. I mean, and it's just an ever so slight, let me move my gloves out of the middle of the road. It's just an ever so slight feel of difference between the full-size Akrapovic can and this can. And unless you're really sensitive, you probably won't notice the difference. You'll probably just enjoy the fact that this LV sounds amazing. It releases all of the definition of the engine and all the crackles and pops and snarls, and just the full character of the V4 is on display with the LV10 much better than it is the Akrapovic. So if you're in a place where you don't have to worry about noise, I would say the LV10 is the better choice to let this bike be what it is. Now, if you're in some place where there's noise ordinances, or you're worried about your neighbors and you have to leave for work at 2 in the morning every day, then you probably don't want to get this exhaust. It's not hugely loud. Like, it's not as loud as the SC Projects, but it's louder than the Akrapovic. So it falls in between those two. The mods that I've done, I discussed a little bit. I've got some levers on there. I've got the rims. It really did wake up the handling from side to side. It sheds about 8 pounds of weight of rotating mass putting these forged aluminum wheels on. And these are the same wheels that come on the RSV4. I highly recommend them. It was $2,000 for the rims, but it's a small price to pay for the incredible amount of handling that you get with the money you spend. I'd say before you do anything to the engine, you should put some rims on your Tuono if you have the means, because that will totally transform the handling of the bike for the better. I also saved weight in the exhaust, getting rid of the old stock can and putting this on. That saves quite a bit of weight. And I also saved some weight in the battery. I have a lithium ion battery in there, which saves about 6 pounds or something ridiculous like that. You save a lot of weight with the lithium ion. So all three of those things together combined, these Tuonos weigh about 460 pounds wet stock. And with the weight savings, this bike is probably weighing somewhere around 440 or maybe even 435 pounds. I shed a good 20 to 25 pounds. I told you about the suspension. This is the EC2 suspension that they put on all of the Tuonos, and they also use this on R1s, and they use them on Ducatis. And this EC2 suspension is it's bulletproof. You know, you just put it on. I mean, you just set it to how you want it and you forget it. It does all the thinking for me. And, you know, so therefore, I love it. It's never given me any kind of a worried feeling. Whenever I'm cornering at high speed on this bike, it always feels super confident. It always feels like it's locked in. I love the suspension on this bike. The maintenance that I've had to do on this bike, it's not as intense as people think it is. People look at Tuono and they go, oh man, I don't want it to be in the shop all the time, and I don't want to have to worry about doing this all the time. All you have to worry about with this bike is changing your oil at 6,000 miles is what the book calls for, and then checking your valves every 12,500 miles. Now, there are two different schedules on this bike, and how you ride it will determine how you do your valve maintenance on this bike. First of all, I recommend, if you're not mechanically inclined, you really need to have an Aprilia dealer somewhere around you where they can work on these bikes, because when it does get to the 12,000 mile mark and you need the valves checked, I'm not going to say it's the hardest job in the world. A lot of guys do it. There's a lot of YouTube videos of guys doing it at home, but I'm not at the level that some of those guys are, I don't think. And while I have done valves before, with this bike, it's just such a special machine. I want to make sure it's done absolutely right, and the cost is between $1,200 and $1,500 for a valve service. And they change the plugs, they reset all the valves and reshim it if necessary, and they change all the gaskets, and they change the plugs, and they change the oil, and a bunch of other checks that happen with that service. But for me, it's just the peace of mind of knowing that it was done the right way. So if you just are messing around on your bike on the weekends and you just putt around, it might take you years to get 12,000 miles on your bike. You might not even need to take it in for service at all. But if you're like me and you put 1,000 miles a month on a bike, then you're going to have to think about it on an annual basis. Now, the only difference, the only caveat to that is if you track your Tuono. If you are riding your Tuono on the racetrack and you are off the limiter every weekend and you're really riding this bike on the upper edges of its performance envelope, then you're going to want to check your valves in half that distance. And that is the race schedule. There's two schedules. There's the regular person schedule, which is 12,500 miles, and then there's the race schedule, which is every 6,000 miles. So you really need to consider and ask yourself, what kind of riding are you going to be doing on this bike? Are you going to be racing it every weekend? If so, you're going to have to check your valves about every 6,000 miles. If you are not racing every weekend, or you're doing the odd track day every now and again, and you're just up in the mountains on weekends, then every 12,000 miles, I would say take it in for its regular service and you will be fine. Now, something that happened to me, and in the interest of transparency, I did have an issue by not checking my valves on time, and I had to end up replacing a head for cylinder number 3 because the exhaust valves had gotten tight. And what I had done was I had done like 4 track days in the span of just a couple of months. And when I wasn't at the track, I was at the tail of the Dragon or the North Georgia mountains, and in all cases I am ripping on this bike. So I mean, I was riding it really hard, and I was off the limiter, and I was at the track racing guys, and I should have had my valves checked at the 6,000 mile interval, but I did not realize that was a necessity at the time. And so I was just like thinking, hey, I've got plenty of time, you know. And then I started to notice the bike was running a little not quite as good, and it was kind of backfiring a little bit at idle when I would start it up. And so I just took it into the guys at Southeast Motorcycle, and they told me that I in fact didn't have proper compression in cylinder number 3, and the only fix for that was to replace the head. So I ended up having to do that. And you know, knowing what I know now, that would have never happened. The cost of the repair was not cheap, and I will just say I could have bought a nice track bike for the amount of money I had to spend to fix it. You know, I had a choice to make. Do I want to keep this bike that is my dream, or do I want to, you know, just sell it, you know, like half-ass and get another bike? And I just did not want to sell it. I did not want to part with this machine. I labored over the decision quite a bit, but I ended up deciding to keep it, to fix it. You know, Dan at the time, who was the head mechanic, said you can either replace the engine or you can fix it. And he was like, your engine is beautiful inside. It's like in excellent shape. If I were you, I would just fix it, and we'll get everything like tip top in there, and you'll have like a brand new bike. So that's what I did, and it's been fine ever since. That was done like the middle of last year, and it's been a year since it's been done, and I've taken this on a couple of track days, and I've ridden it at the Dragon, and it has been fine. It actually runs better now than it ever has, in my opinion. So when you are looking at an Aprilia Tuono, you honestly have to ask yourself, are you a regular rider? Are you just putting around the city? Are you just messing around on weekends? Are you riding to school? Are you riding to work? If so, you have absolutely nothing to fear in your Aprilia Tuono, and just stay on the prescribed 12,500 mile valve checks and change your oil regularly. And that's all you have to worry about with this bike. But if you're going to be racing it, if you're going to do a track day every other week for the whole year, you're going to need to check your valves a little more frequently. That is the only thing that I don't think people understand about this bike that they need to understand. Some people are freaked out and think, oh man, if I buy it, it's just going to be a problem. You won't have any problems unless you're using it as a race bike and you're not aware of the intervals for using it as a race bike. You understand? So hopefully that doesn't freak anybody out or scare anyone. It shouldn't. It didn't scare me. I understood what happened, and the bike has been brilliant before then and ever since then, which goes to reliability. Other than that happening, this bike has had no problems. I've never had any problems with the electronics. I've never had any problems with anything on this bike, not even a light bulb being out. Like, the bike has been totally reliable and starts up on me every time, and has never left me stranded, and has never acted weird. You know, I hear people say, oh, it went into limp mode. It's never gone into limp mode. The bike has been completely reliable and trustworthy. I would say, you know, if you're going to use this bike as a track bike, like I said before, you just need to be aware of the intervals. And, you know, in all honesty, there are better track bikes than this bike. There are better track bikes. You could get an RS660, or you could get an RSV4, which would be a little better for track than this bike. You know, an RS660 or an RSV4 would probably be a little more suited because you're down and out of the wind, and you have the aerodynamics working for you. It's really hard to get out of the wind on this thing when you're running a $160 on the back straight at Road Atlanta. So I would just say, you know, think about that too. If you're going to do a lot of track time, you might want to get an RSV4. The summation of my ownership experience, to sum up, this bike has been an absolute dream bike for me. When I saw it on the showroom floor, I knew I had to have it because I knew it was rare and I knew it was special. A black on black Aprilia Tuono factory. You don't see these every day. You hardly ever see these. There's an 1100 RR that looks similar to this, but it doesn't have Olin suspension, and it doesn't have the factory tail like this. These number 5s here, by the way, a little quick side story. Those were sent to me by Romy, who is Carlin Dunn's mother, and she actually had these 5s made in honor of him that she will send to you. I think you send her like 20 bucks and she'll send you a few of these. And I put these on this bike because that's my tribute to Carlin Dunn. This bike is a Carlin Dunn inspired machine in my mind because of the sacrifice he made that year. This bike is even in existence. So to pay tribute to him, I keep those 5s on there. It keeps it close to my heart. And the fact that his mother sent me that just makes it even more special. So this bike has a lot of meaning to me. It's a very special machine, and I absolutely love owning it. It's fast, it's fun, it's freaking amazing sounding, and I don't see ever getting rid of it. I will keep it in my collection, and whatever bikes will be in addition to this, because, you know, this is the bike I'm supposed to have. I struggled with it after the engine thing happened on what to do, and should I get another bike, and I was even thinking about getting a Triumph for a second, and, you know, I was gonna, you know, sell it and get another a new Tuono, and none of it made any sense. What made sense was to be still, give it some time, fix it, and ride it, and keep it, and enjoy it, because this is your bike. Well, it now has 27,000 miles on it. I bought it with 5,000. 3 years later, it now has, I put 22,000 miles on it in 3 years. And all of those miles have been trouble-free with the exception of the, you know, like I said, that was due to me not knowing. So hopefully you know now, and you can make an informed decision if you decide to get one of these masterful machines. It handles like a dream. It's fast as I don't know what. It sounds beautiful. I love to look at it in the garage. It's just, you know, you can't go wrong with this bike. And I did ride an MT10 last year for an extended amount of time. I actually had one for a full trip from the Dragon to Georgia, North Georgia, and I was able to ride in all those twisties and really get to know the MT10. And while it is a brilliant bike, and I really enjoyed riding the MT10. MT stands for Masters of Torque. I just felt it was lacking because I was used to this bike. And there's just things that it doesn't do that this bike does. There's just power rushes you get from this bike that you don't get from an MT10. And granted, this bike has 20 more horsepower, but it's not all about horsepower. It's also about the delivery of that horsepower. And so I've had experience on other bikes, and I always come back to this one. So anyway, that's my wrap for this bike, the 2019 Aprilia Tuono factory. Not a bunch of technical jargon in this video. It was just more of a real heart-to-heart talk with you, my viewers, about this bike. You know this bike, you've seen this bike, and I just wanted to tell you my story of what it's been like owning it and the future of me and this bike. And the future is very bright with this bike. It's not going anywhere. I plan on keeping it in the stable for many years to come, and you know, I've got a grandson that might get it in my will, who knows. So anyway, that's all I've got. Thanks for watching Ant-Man Moto today. Like, subscribe, tell a moto buddy, and remember to take care of each other, but more importantly, take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, I mean, what the hell good are you to anybody else, honestly? And thank you, Southeast Motorcycle, for keeping me taken care of. Southeast Motorcycle, for all your Aprilia needs, they will get you straight. They got Ant-Man Moto straight, and they will get you straight. All right, well, and it looks like we finished right in time for nightfall. Over that way, in that direction, there is a chemical fire that has got the whole area of Atlanta under chlorine gas smoke. Just fun fact. So we're also going to be breathing chlorine for the next couple of days. Isn't that fun? Alrighty, let's listen to this beautiful machine come to life. Should I get rear sets for it? Should I? I've never touched anything, and these rear sets are super comfortable. Should I get rear sets? Fires up. I've got the LED lights on here, so it looks like a modern bike. The guys at Southeast Motorcycle sold me these high side turn signals, so when you turn them on, they do that neat little thing. I should get some up front to match, but I don't care. I keep it in race. My traction control's on 3, and I keep the bike in either race or track. If I want to feel the cracking, I keep it in race. And if I want it to be a little smoother delivery, I put it in track. The way you switch modes is just by hitting the starter button once it's running. See that? Push that button and it flashes. Push it again and it changes. Now it's in track. Change it, push it again, now it's in sport. Sport with the Gabbro Tune is the softest power delivery of all of them. They're all full power, but the power will come at you much softer in sport. So if you're being overwhelmed by the power of this bike, you can put it in sport and it will soften it up. Now that is not true for the bike if you have it in a stock tune. In stock configurations, all of these modes work different. I think sport is the most on-off throttle, and race is in the middle, and track is the softest. But I prefer race and track. I like to feel the cracking. I've been sitting there talking to you for a half hour, so I know my tires are cold. Go for a quick spin. You can hear what it's like for my neighbors. Gotta go easy through here too, because the amount of deer that come out at this time of day is a lot. And this thing thundering by, it spooks them right out the woods, and they'll just jump right. I mean, it's like they aim for my headlight. I mean, the power delivery on this thing is so amazing. It never gets old. I've had the bike for 3 years. Before that, I had another V4 for 2 years, and before that, I had the V2 for like 3 years or 5 years. I had that V2. The power delivery just never gets old on a Tuono, man. My one twisty road. Woo! Look at how it just surgically goes through that turn, and that's what you can expect from this bike. What I would normally do is I would normally go down there, but because of the time of day it is, I'm just going to give you that little quick blast. Is what it's like to ride an Aprilia Tuono. I'm telling you, man. It don't ever get old, man. And with the Leo Vinci, it gives you what you want, it gives you what you need. You hear all that engine character? Listen. All the snaps and the crackles. You get all that, man. The other thing I would say about this bike that I forgot to mention in the review that I just gave you is tire life. You will go through some rear tires on this bike, about 2 rears to every 1 front. So I would recommend that you take it easy on the throttle if you want your tires to last longer. If you don't, then just plan on, if you get good sticky rubber, like I only run Pirellis on this. So if you get a good sticky tire like an SC3 or a Rosso Corsa 4, God damn it, or a Rosso Corsa 4, hello officer, then you're going to get about 2,000 miles max out of your rear. Now your fronts will last you a bit longer. Probably every 4,000 to 5,000 miles you'll replace a front, but your rears will be gone in 2,000 miles or less. I know guys out in California that go through tires every 1,000 miles or less, but I mean they're just ripping like crazy on their super sports or on their hyper nakeds. These hyper nakeds with all this torque, man, it just wreaks havoc on rubber. It really does. So that, and for my oil changes, I switched from Motul 7100, which I had used faithfully for many years, until the price of it just got so high. I was like, okay, I can't afford to spend $100 per oil change. That's just like not making any sense to me, like why it would cost that much. So I switched, and I found that Castrol Power One full synthetic is what this bike actually is, what they recommend you use for this bike, and it's like half the cost of Motul. I've had no problem since I made that switch, which has been about a year now, a year and a half, and yeah, so I recommend Castrol Power One. I'm a believer. Pirelli tires and Castrol Power One is what keeps this bike going. It does also, when I said I had the Gabbro Tune, the air filter is a DNA. It has a DNA air filter in it, and the DNA air filter actually works so much better than the stock air filter because it gets rid of the little plastic frame that holds the stock filter in place, and it seals the whole area because the body of the DNA is made of rubber, and it seals against the plastic air box of the Tuono so much better than that plastic frame did. The plastic frame leaves gaps, and dirt gets under those gaps. And if you ever check your air filter on a stock Tuono after, you know, per every oil change, like you change your oil every, like say you change your oil at every 3,000 miles, you know, you should check your air filter when you change your oil. If you're not doing that, you should start. I mean, like, check it while you're changing your oil. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't take that much longer. But when you do that with the stock air filter, you will see how dirty your intakes are, and you will be horrified. You'll be like, oh my God, why are my intakes so dirty? They're dirty because that frame is letting dirt bypass it. So DNA air filter fixes that completely. When you go to change your oil and clean your air filter, number one, you don't have to pay for a replacement air filter because you're running a DNA, and all you got to do is just wash it off and put some more oil on it, and boom, you're good to go. But not only are you not buying a new filter, your air box and your intakes are nice and clean compared to stock. So that is another tip from Ant-Man Moto that I've learned through years of running this bike, and it'll save you some wear and tear. Alright, so I guess I'll say goodbye again. I said goodbye once in the parking lot, then I said, hey, wait a minute, there's a little more info I've got for these guys. I'm glad she didn't make a right turn. Don't ride like a jackass, Dean. I do ride like a jackass, though. I do a lot of this because of my time I spent in California. I also have the bike geared a little different. I put a 43 tooth rear sprocket on this bike, and it makes the power a bit more usable on the street because it's, I don't want to say it's geared tall because it's really not, but just the amount of power this bike makes, and then when you do the Gabbro Tune on top of it, you can't really even use the bike or rev it out at all on the street without like going felony speeds. So I'm not saying that it runs any slower with a 43 tooth, but it's like you're able to enjoy the bike a little bit more because it you know, revs out a little bit quicker, and it's not gaining quite as much speed, but it really is still. But you could just use it more, you know, you could shift the gears a little more. So I went 1543, and not a huge change, but enough to make a difference with the kind of riding I do on the street, and I think you will benefit from it too. And it makes it a lot easier to ride at the Dragon, you know, because it's a little, the RPMs are up a little higher, so I can shoot out of turns really fast in second gear compared to stock, where it has to work a little harder because it's lugging down lower with that 42 back there. Now some people go the opposite direction and they'll put a 41 tooth on this because they just want to use it for touring, and you can do that too. The gearing that this bike comes with, 1542, is pretty perfect. So, you know, if you re-gear it, it's just for your own specific riding needs, you know, but definitely not mandatory, and a personal taste thing for sure. Oh man, the dude was wheeling. Why do I always get around the wheelie guys? Like, they're never going the same direction as me, man. Damn. By the time I turn around, he'll be long gone. So anyway, that's all of it. It is now dark. I was trying to get this in before nightfall. I hope you enjoyed it. Ant-Man Moto, like, subscribe, and tell a moto buddy. And I'll see you on the next one. Woo! Neutral is a bitch to find sometimes. I do not know why it's so hard. I will sit here and burn right the fuck up trying to find neutral. I mean, you'd be trying to find it in stoplights at traffic, and you just give up. That little red wrench in the corner just means Michael has to turn off the service light. It's been serviced, but it will come on off based on its schedule it's set on, regardless of if you need service or not. So it doesn't need service, but it just came on at 25,000. Goodbye.